Good afternoon, everyone. We're carrying on the sustainability theme this afternoon after a couple of interesting Q&As this morning. My name is Matthew Campelli. I'm the editor and founder of the Sustainability Report, the inside track on sport and sustainability. And I'm pleased to be joined this afternoon by Isabella Burczak, who's the advocacy and mass event manager at the UCI. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, watching your session this morning, a couple of things really jumped out, some really interesting points. But the thing that I think was most interesting was the work you're doing with the 10 regions and cities that you're working with, the Bike City Label Initiative. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit in more of a practical sense, how about you develop that project and what it means to engage these cities in what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so the UCI Bike City label is a label that we give to cities and regions that, on top of hosting UCI events, also have very clear strategies to promote cycling for the population. So there's a number of criteria actually that we base the label on. So we have kind of the hosting UCI events, and then there's 8 different criteria that range from road safety, children cycling, long-term strategic plans, financial planning, monitoring and evaluation. And so we have the cities that fill in the questionnaire, kind of provide us with the information, and then get awarded the label. And so the idea is not just to kind of, okay, here you have a stamp and great, but be able to work with them and be able to promote the work that they're doing, and really to be able to inspire other cities to do the same. So for us, kind of, we use them as an example that we can share with other host cities that are hosting UCI events, as there are hundreds of them around the world each year. So kind of one of the objectives is really to be able to leave a better legacy for the population, in terms of kind of not just bringing a 1 day, 1 week or 2 week event to a city, but trying to see how we can bring an event, inspire people that see all these athletes, but then feel like they can actually also do the same. So providing them with safe infrastructures, providing them with programs to promote children cycling, having road safety initiatives or closed road mass events for the public. So it's really kind of trying to get those cities and regions to be more active in terms of their plans to host events. And then kind of that's one side of it. And then kind of when we're talking to new host cities, it's really getting them to think outside the box and say, okay, you want to host a UCI event, but do you know that there's much more you can do with it as well? So that's kind of with the new ones, and with the existing ones, it's showing them that kind of there are lots of best practices, lots of programs and initiatives that they're running that we can share further. So I mean, if I take one example, which is Drenthe in the Netherlands, that I always use as an example, because they're probably one of the lesser known provinces in the Netherlands, and they have a very clear set of objectives of what they want to reach. They want to become the healthiest province in the Netherlands by 2020. They want to increase cycle use. They want to kind of tackle a number of environmental problems. And so they're actually using the label for a lot of their initiatives, and the label is actually giving them a lot of international recognition, and so they're getting more funding as well from the government. And so it's kind of a virtuous circle of, we're providing them with the platform and we're constantly promoting their projects, and so they're actually getting more support now. And so if we can help kind of push that wheel and help things to run even better than that, that's a great result.
Well, that's incredibly interesting, because when you look at it and you look at sport and how sport can accelerate or influence development, sustainable development within a city or within a region, and you're talking about very concrete targets, becoming the healthiest region, I think, in the Netherlands, and looking at set environmental targets. But when you talk about the criteria that you mentioned earlier for the project, is that the kind of thing you're looking for? Sort of long-term planning? Are you looking for kind of set objectives, or do you kind of collaborate on the objectives when you're working with these cities and regions?
A bit of both. Some of them come with very clear ideas of what they want to achieve. They also have very different plans, I would say. Some of them are very much focused on tourism development. So if I take Finn in Denmark, their whole concept is based around becoming the most popular cycling destination in Northern Europe. And so they've created a concept called Bike Island 2020, and they're putting a lot of effort into promoting bike tourism and kind of all of the different areas that would fall under under that platform. while not, I mean, they still work on all the other areas, but for them it's really bike tourism. Drenthe will be health. Limburg in the Netherlands is looking more at recreation and how to get more kids cycling so that there'll be more elite athletes and having more kind of training facilities. So you can kind of see that they have different angles that they're working on, but they still have to meet the 8 different criteria in terms of having strategies for each one of them. And it's not necessarily cities that right now, today, meet all of the criteria and are already delivering, I don't know, a 25% usage rate of bicycles. It's also rewarding the ones that maybe aren't there but have a very clear plan to get there. So you'll see very different levels of delivery between the cities and regions, which is fine in that we really want to encourage the ones that are trying to get there and working to do that and have the support to do that.
So on a practical sense, how do you support them in achieving these goals? Because some of them are very diverse.
It's between kind of going to visit them or being in strategic meetings. Some of them have asked us to be to have kind of a UCI representative within kind of a meeting with the local government. Sometimes it's presenting at one of their Finn had a tourism conference and asked if kind of the UCI could help and promote the work that they're doing and show kind of allow them to have a bit of recognition for what they're doing. So whenever we can help in that way, we do. And then one of the kind of products we developed last year was the UCI Bike City Forum, which is a conference on active mobility where it was a 2-day event. So kind of the first day was more open to the public and focused on all sorts of topics related to mobility and highlighting kind of the impact of bikes for sustainable development, for health, for physical activity, infrastructure planning. So we had different elements. But then the second day was actually only for the Bike City and Region Network, where we had each city and region present. It was really up to them. They could present kind of best practices, they could present challenges, they could present questions to the others, but it was really to start creating that network where they feel like they're part of a family and they can exchange with the family and they can learn from the others as well. So what we're really trying to do is kind of create this network of cities and again, kind of non-exclusive, where we'd like much more to be involved and be part of that discussion, because I think the more cities and regions and countries and continents we have, the more varied and interesting that exchange will be.
Do you ever proactively look for cities and regions, or do you just wait for the applications?
Both. So I have some that proactively reach out to us and say we are very interested to have the label kind of part of our objectives and kind of what do we do to get it. And so I work with them on the preparation phase, because all the candidates are submitted to the management committee in September at the Road World Championships. So at the same time as we announce the next event hosts in September, we announce the next Bike City label recipients. And then there are cities that I'll reach out to, and it's either cities that already kind of do a lot of events, and then I'll try to push them and say, okay, but what more are you doing, and kind of what programs are you doing, and well, maybe you should be doing more, and have you considered looking at this A, B, or C, or D, or cities that I mean, because our events team is also trying to sell their events as well, as looking at, well, what cities are actually great examples of promoting cycling, and well, maybe they're interested in having a cycling event to help kind of reinforce all the work that they're doing. So it's kind of looking at from different angles and really trying to work with those cities and regions that might be part of the network.
It seems like there's a few stakeholders to work with, particularly when you're working with the city. What are the main challenges that you kind of come across when you are trying to, particularly when you're trying to proactively work with the city?
Maybe availability sometimes, and that some of them could be on so many different projects at a time that, or we're kind of chasing them for info, in that we're always trying to put up articles on the website and share what they're doing, and they don't actually necessarily have the time to get back to us and so that we can actually share what they're doing, because they're on so many different fronts, and maybe they have a small team, and like some of the cities have kind of one bicycle I mean, the people we work with are very different. In some cases, it'll be the National Federation that's very much involved. In others, it'll be the bicycle planner of the city. In another case, it'll be kind of the urban planning team. And another one, it could be the tourism board. So I have different types of contact persons that I work with. And then it's also for them to get that support from all the different stakeholders within their territory. Because in the end, kind of, if you look at the criteria, it's so varied in terms of kind of between kids and infrastructures and road safety and budgets that it's impossible to find one person that will actually be working on all of that. So it's up to them then to do that work within their own territory to get all that information back and to be able to kind of continuously update and share and kind of be part of that exchange.
You mentioned earlier one of the pieces of work you're looking at is to try and engage the national federations more. Is it an easier process to get into these cities when you're working with the national federation? And what are the challenges of actually doing that, working with the federations?
I guess, so there's the Bike City label that we will work with the federations, but then just more broadly, the idea is to see how we can get the national federations more involved in this area. So there are some that are fantastic examples and that I'm learning from. So if I take British Cycling, and I spent 3 days with them just a few weeks ago, I mean, there's lots to learn from them. And what I'd like to do with these kind of great national federations is actually be able to share what they're doing with the others so that they feel inspired by kind of what their counterparts are doing in other countries. And then you have other federations that will maybe have 2 people working within the federation. They're in charge of, getting all the athletes prepared for the World Championships or the Olympic Games, and they'll say, well, we don't have the time or expertise or resources to do this, so help us. And this is where we're trying to see how we can develop kind of toolkits, how we can develop kind of ready-made programs, and how we can help them be able to implement strategies that already work, because we know that they don't have the time or the expertise to do that.
So you'll develop kind of frameworks and toolkits for them so it makes the process a lot easier for them. When will those toolkits be available to them?
So at the Congress in September, we'll be launching 2 toolkits and one kind of going back to British Cycling. I've been working with a team from Bikeability in the UK that have a very, very successful program to promote children's education, children's cycling education. So they've helped us put together kind of a template for national federations to be able to develop their own program. So it's not actually giving them a program and saying, here's what you need to do with children, ABCD, but here are the steps you need to take in order to develop your own program, and here are tools to help you. So in terms of data, in terms of statistics, in terms of case studies, so it's actually empowering federations to do kind of the same, maybe to a smaller extent, but the same type of work that they've done within the UK. So the Bikeability one, and then we have a toolkit for event organizers to create side events for Cycling for All. So what can they do to engage the population around their kind of bigger races and elite events? So those 2 will come out during the Congress in September. And then at the end of June, we'll be launching, or rather it'll be the Cycling Embassy of Denmark will be launching a new digital platform, which we've partnered on, so kind of both financially and content-wise in terms of best practices from Denmark when it comes to cycling promotion. So the Cycling Embassy of Denmark is a bit the brain of cycling within Denmark. They work with cities around the world to help them learn from what Denmark has done. And so we've been working with them where they've basically put together a whole digital platform with case studies, guidance, examples, videos, pictures, so that and it's a public website. Anyone can access and learn about kind of all types of cycling promotion. And so we've added in content in terms of the link between kind of everyday and elite cycling. So to show kind of, talking about the label, talking about athlete ambassadors, talking about side events at races, and trying to show that there's kind of much more you can do around a sports event to promote everyday cycling.
what is Denmark doing that is so unique promotion-wise? Because I find it really interesting. What are they doing that you think is best practice and for other countries to follow?
Infrastructures is a huge point in that they have the infrastructures. In Copenhagen, they almost don't even have enough given the number of cyclists that are on the roads. But they do a great job in terms of creating protected infrastructures for cyclists where people feel safe, where they feel they can take a bike and they will never cross a car. So that's and I mean it's taken them 30 years to do that. So I've done a few kind of visits with the team in Copenhagen, and they'll always explain that I mean they were a city just like any other 40 years ago, and then kind of within 30 years kind of developed this infrastructure plan and have created this. And I guess a difficulty for other cities when they look at Copenhagen, they'll say, well, they're so far ahead. I can't even picture us getting anywhere close to what they've done. So
how do you counter that?
So actually, one of the things we did with the forum is we had the Danes and the Dutch present on best practices, but then we also tried to provide examples of other cities that aren't in Denmark or the Netherlands. So we had Seville and Manchester present on examples of how they, within a year or two, were able to create a cycling network within the city, how they were able to convince public authorities of the kind of the positive impacts of cycling for the city. And so they really spoke about very simple solutions, I would say, and kind of showing people that in the end they're a city like any other that has managed to do a lot. It still has a long way to go, and they'll tell you that they still have a lot of work to do. But I think people in the room, and we had a lot of city and region representatives present, kind of felt like they could really connect with them as well, to say, oh, well, actually, we're maybe closer to them than the Danes and the Dutch, where there's also that cycling culture. And that's one of the things, I think, where everyone just feels like the bike is a real mode of transport, which actually isn't the case in every city and is a respected form of transport. So it's also trying to see how do you change the mindset and the culture of people within a country.
So I guess it's very clear to see how the Bike City label positively impacts the cities and regions that you're working with. But from a UCI point of view, what are the benefits for you as an organisation to have a project like this and being associated with sustainable development in cities and regions?
It's showing that there's much more to the sport, and much more to the sport than just the competition side and the elite side. And I guess one of the benefits we have is that we're a sport that is a form of transport that not many IFs have as a characteristic. So it's really trying to see how can we capitalize on the fact that we represent both the sport and form of transport, and how do we bring them closer together, and how can we create an international platform for organizations that are doing great work. So if I take World Bicycle Relief that presented this morning, that's doing incredible work to promote mobility in Africa that, I mean, I'm never going to attain within my role at the UCI, but if we can help promote that work that they're doing, bring it on an international platform, get people to learn about them and support them, then I think that's kind of one of the benefits that we can bring to all of these organizations in terms of promoting great work that they're already doing.
Last question I want to ask before I open up to the audience for Q&A is, I guess now we're in a time where there's a sense that the whole notion of climate change and what's happening to the world is very much in the public sphere now. People are becoming very aware of what's happening to the world around global warming and climate change. And using bicycles as opposed to driving cars or other methods of transport is a very attractive proposition if you want to, do your bit for the environment. Do you get a sense now at UCI that there's a real opportunity here to capitalize on this kind of frame of mind that the public seems to be in at the moment?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think kind of whether it's air quality, congestion in cities, people are kind of moving more and more into cities, the traffic problems. I think the bicycle is an answer to a lot of these problems. So it's trying to see kind of how can we really be involved. Like, it's great to say, oh, the bicycle is a great tool and we need to promote the bicycle. But this is kind of part of the work I'm trying to do is, okay, what clear actions can we take? So we're trying to see how we can work closer with the UN, how we can work closer with the WHO, and trying to see how we can promote the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity that the WHO has launched. How we can try to convince city leaders to take this more seriously as well, and how they can see that mobility is one of the answers. It's not the only one, and by far, I mean, there's many other actions that have to be taken, but if we can already try to convince people of the work that needs to be done in terms of mobility, then that's already one kind of step forward. But then again, it's really kind of what are the concrete actions we can take to do that.
Is it just a case of, maybe this is simplistic, but just a case of messaging, you know, like you say to the, local and national governments and even to people to some extent?
Yeah, messaging is definitely part of it, and I've been spending a bit of time to see how we can be more involved when it comes to comms and sharing articles, just even articles on the website or social media, and getting it on the UCI platforms to show that there's a different angle as well to what we do. Because the reality is most people see the UCI as only being concerned by the sport, and that's kind of the pushback I used to get at the beginning when I would go into meetings talking about transport or meeting with other organizations that have been doing this for decades. After being on the job for about a month, the question I would get is, well, why are you actually in the room? Because you're representing the sport, you're representing the Lycra-clad crew, why are you even here? So it's also been work to show that finally, no, there's actually a very clear objective from the UCI. It's also in the President's manifesto, and it's in his Agenda 2022 to see how the UCI can be involved in promoting the mobility side of cycling, and how we can get more kids on bikes, and how we can get people using a bicycle as a form of leisure. So it's really looking much wider than the sport.
Thanks, Isabella. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi, Tim from Forward Game. You were talking a lot about bike promoting and specifically promoting it to kids. So my question is, how different the promoting to kids is? Speaking, following on your question, what do you tell them? So specifically, what do you tell the kids?
So we're not, I can't say we're directly communicating to kids yet within the UCI. Our national federations are, I'd say, much closer to the clubs and much closer to what happens on the ground. But what we're trying to do kind of with the Bikeability program or the Bikeability Toolkit is empower organizations that work with kids to be able to get them on bikes. I guess the difference would be, I mean, you need that fun aspect. Like with the kids, it has to be fun. And how do you get kids riding again? And how do you get their parents? One of the problems we see is the parents no longer want their kids on bikes because they're terrified of them being on the road. So how do we find solutions to get parents to want to put their kids on bikes on the road? Which is one of the key questions kind of I've kind of think of on a daily basis in terms of, okay, how do we promote road safety, and how do we get people more involved in road safety, and how do parents feel like they can actually put their kid on a bike and ride, because yes, we're not all in the Netherlands or Denmark. But I think if you want more kids on bikes, you have to make it fun for them as well. And that's kind of part of the thinking as well for kind of next steps and next projects we may want to deliver is how do we now approach that area, and how do we get more involved to reach them.
I suppose to some extent biking is more fun in some places than others, for example. Like, for example, in the Netherlands, if you're in Amsterdam, biking is just part of the culture then. It's very, very accessible for cycling. Whereas if you're in London, for example, perhaps not so much, it's more of a hazard than it being a fun activity, particularly if you're commuting with a bicycle.
Yeah, although I met with Will Norman a few weeks ago and got to learn about all the work he's doing in London to promote cycling, and it's actually incredible to see how much work he's doing and the Transport for London team is doing to increase infrastructures, to get more people on bikes, whether it's the bike sharing systems or financial incentives for people to buy bikes as well. I think as much as, yes, there are lots of cars and there's lots of traffic in London, the city is actually doing a lot of work to get more people cycling. And if you speak to Will, just the numbers that he shares in terms of the increase of people on bikes is quite impressive as well.
I think we have time for a few more questions if anyone has any. Okay, fantastic. Isabella, thank you so much for your time today. Please give a warm round of applause for Isabella. Thank you.